Sometimes I come across with such amazing instructive positions. I tell myself I either have to make a video about this or I will put this position to one of my courses. It's one of those positions, folks. Black to play. Bator versus Jonny Hector, 1994. Black has one idea that wins the game from this position. There's so much tension going on between those pieces, right? So many exchange ideas, potentially like this, potentially some other ways. I love those positions where negotiating the correct exchange directly leads to a winning endgame. Now, this is for intermediate players, my friends. Please stop the video. Observe the situation. Give yourself 5 to 10 minutes. You'll be rewarded in the end. Okay? Weigh the options. Black has a winning idea. I want you to go a little bit deeper and judge the resulting endgame and argue for yourself or justify to yourself why that could be a winning idea for Black. Please stop the video, then I will continue. My friends, let's observe the situation and let's orient ourselves to this position. When I look at a position like this, I obviously see this little weakness on b2. Attacked once, guarded only once by the rook. The rook is sort of tied down on that pawn. That pawn is also frozen and fixed on b2 because of my pawn on a4. And I want to keep it as such. All right? This bishop is far away from lending support to the pawn on b2 as well. All black pawns are on light square and our bishop is on a dark square, which means there's harmony and coordination between the bishop and the pawns, right? They control different colors, so they complement each other. And those light square pawns are not easily attacked, right? They cannot be attacked directly by the white pieces. So they are not real weaknesses in the position. If you look at the white pawns, they're all on the same color as this guy on e3. That's my first strategic prompt for you. Given this observation, maybe you would love to transition at some point to a pure bishop ending, right? Keep that in mind. Freeze it in your head. A pure bishop endgame might be winning for black. But how do you transition to such an endgame? That's prompt number one. Now, let's analyze some options, right? For example, if you look at the most direct move, knight e2, well, they will take back with the bishop and they are getting ready to challenge our bishop with bishop c3, correct? There is no easy follow-up for black in this position. You sort of gave away the advantage. White is very, very close, in fact, to full equality in this position. Then you might ask yourself, what happens if I go knight d4 and attack the rook this way? And if they take on d4, then I'm recapturing, let's say, with the rook in this position, right? But even so, after king e2, there is no easy way for us to win this position because they will play knight f3 to chase our rook. Maybe the knight will go to g5 to attack f7. Maybe it will go to e5 to force a trade, right? Again, it's not easy to exploit the weakness on b2 in this position. Then you might ask yourself, well, what happens if I just simply attack the rook with knight a1, crazy looking move? The idea is to just capture on b2 once the rook moves. The problem is the rook can go to c5 to attack here, but even after rook c1, if you take on b2, then you'll have rook b1, and now they will capture on b5 once the bishop moves. You messed up this position badly. So, looking at those moves also doesn't lead anywhere directly for black in this position, right? The feeling is that, yes, we have a better endgame because of the weakness on b2, but we want a good idea. We want a good exchange operation to transition into a winning bishop endgame. And here again, please stop the video and tell me which move Jonny Hector played in this position. I love it, folks. You're a great player if you found the move rook c8. Rook c8 forces the trade of the rooks because the rook has no way to prevent this exchange. The art of exchanging pieces. After they take on c8, you tell me, do you take back directly or do you first induce this intermediate check before grabbing the rook on c8? There's only one solution for black. And you're a great player if you directly captured the rook in this position Why? If you take on d2, then you invite bishop d2. After takes, you invite the move bishop c3, and the bishop is challenging our guy on f6 while also defending their weakness on b2. And if you trade the bishops, folks, it's a completely drawn endgame. You might ask yourself, hey, my king is going this way. The problem is, if your king moves to d5, then you lose after the breakthrough move g4, because then this guy is becoming unstoppable once you take on g4. After h5, the king cannot enter the square of the pawn, and it's white who is winning in this position. Thus, you have to play the move king d6, and the game is objectively a draw. Going back, rook c8, beautiful. Rook takes c8, and king takes c8 is the only winning move. Please look at this position. Now, this pawn on b2 becomes a bigger target because there is no more rook on c2. Well, you're attacking it directly. There is no way for the bishop to move while guarding it. There is no way for the knight to move while also guarding it. Thus, you literally force this transformation. After takes, notice. Now you transition the game into a pure bishop endgame, same color bishop endgame, while you have an amazing bishop because it speaks with the pawns. It complements the pawns, right? All of our pawns are on the opposite color of our bishop, but maybe more importantly, your bishop has a clear target that is fixed on the same color. This means you're forcing the move bishop c1. Terrible, right? Terrible restriction. Tie down bishop on c1. The main function is to guard the pawn on b2. That's also a great pawn, by the way. You're freezing the weakness on b2. And now comes the next stage, my friends. Well, the next stage is very simple. You move the king up, and at some point, this will be a zugzwang. Let's look at the most logical move, king d3, king d5. Already here, folks, white is running short of moves. The bishop cannot move because I will take on b2. Well, the king has no natural move left because if you do this, then you invite king c4 invasions. Zugzwang is following. Thus, f3 seems to be the only try. Maybe some g4 at some point. The problem is, after the move bishop d4, zugzwang. The king cannot make a move. The bishop cannot make a move because I take on b2. So after bishop d4, my friend, if they go g4 anyway, you can take twice because the good thing is your bishop is stopping white's h-pawn, and you can roll your pawn. This will actually resemble the game continuation, right? Roll the pawn, or even just go king e4 in this position, and you basically win directly. This pawn is completely harmless. It's coming, and the game is over. After bishop d4, it's zugzwang, because if they play king d2, then you can go bishop f2, and you win either of these pawns, right? If g4, you just take. This pawn is running. This pawn is completely harmless because in the worst case scenario, my bishop will stop the pawn on its rails, right? g3, and the game is completely finished. After bishop f2, if they try king c3, then you just grab both of these guys, my friends. And your h-pawn is now queening, becomes unstoppable. And after bishop d4, if they try king e2, nothing changes. King c4 invasion. And again, full zugzwang. The bishop cannot make a move because of this. The king has to guard d3 against invasions. Well, if you go g4, then just take twice. And the game is completely finished because that pawn is still harmless. So seeing all this, white tried the move f3 directly in the actual game. The problem is nothing changes. King d5 is coming, and now the king wants to invade. Thus, king d3, and we are back to square one. Bishop d4 was chosen in the actual game. And again, white is in zugzwang, my friends. So beautiful. King e2, king c4, just as I showed you. Now the invasion is coming. The king is tied down to stop king d3. The bishop is tied down on that pawn. There's only one move left, g4. But of course, black will take twice. And now they also created one more pass pawn. While this pawn is completely harmless because of this beautiful bishop. They tried h5. And the simplest possible win for black is to use the pawn like a decoy to enter into the white position, right? A very simple winning plan. King c2, the bishop is trapped. Look at this. The bishop has no squares. The bishop will be captured on the next turn by the black king. Incredible, beautiful game. White resigned in this position. This game really had big impression on me. That's why I will put this position to my workbook for the Art of series on Chessable. I'm now compiling a workbook that combines 4 different arts. Art of exchanging pieces, awakening pieces, burying pieces, and multi-purpose moves. This example is a beautiful example of the art of exchanging pieces. By exchanging the right pieces from this position, black is forcing a winning bishop endgame. It's an amazingly beautiful chunk that you learn first. Once you know these chunks, that this endgame is amazingly beautiful for black, given the reasons we mentioned, right? Weak pawns, weaknesses, terrible bishop versus great bishop, and so on and so on. Black could reverse engineer its way to reach this winning endgame. What makes this position really beautiful is black has so many different ways to trade the pieces in this position, and yet they chose the right exchange. First sight, this rook looks more active than this rook on c2, right? Because it's totally tied down on the pawn on b2, while we have the open file for our rook. But you see how a grandmaster is thinking. He has an end state in mind with this trade. Also look how forcing this move is. That's the function of good exchanges. Sometimes you can really force the trade of the right pieces, as in this case, to reach a dream. Also, please observe, many players would refuse this trade because, hey, I'm creating a double pawn in my position. That should be bad for me. See how the master is accepting double pawns, because that pawn is a beautiful pawn, freezing the weakness on b2. And since the bishop is a colorblind piece, it cannot attack the pawn on b3. A weakness in chess is only a weakness if it can be exploited. Yes, black has all these weak pawns, let's say b3, b5, h5, but white has no pieces left to attack those targets, while black bishop is putting pressure on the weakness on b2. And finally, we know another endgame pattern. Zugzwang, right? Zugzwang is the sharpest endgame weapon. He goes bishop d4, and white has no moves left in this position. You have to give way to my king, and there is no other way because of the bishop problem on c1, right? Crazy bad. We don't want our pieces to be tied down on a weakness like that, and that goes on to hurt white. A beautiful example of same color bishop endgame as well, right? Examples like this can really teach you good fundamentals when it comes to certain very important endgame chunks. In this case, we witnessed how to win the same color bishop endgame when your bishop is shining on your opponent's bishop. Capablanca rule number 1, he said we should generally place our pawns on the opposite color of our bishop, and that's a beautiful demonstration for black, right? Capablanca will be happy because they complement each other. This rule usually holds. There are of course exceptions, but usually, right? We want our pawn chains to be on the different color of our bishop so they complement each other. On the contrary, if you look at the white structure, almost all of their pawns are placed on the same color as their bishop. Both those pawns are blunting the bishop, right? Limiting its mobility, for example, but also they are tying down the bishop in protecting those pawns. I will leave you guys again with this beautiful position where g3 forced the king to move away from that square, and the black king simply attacked and won the bishop on c1, right? Beautiful connection between the early exchange until the end. I love these games because it really shows us the forming and the conclusion of a simple idea and a winning idea in the endgame. That's why endgames are so beautiful, because it really shows us, how a plan unfolds relatively in a cleaner way, right? Because white has no counterplay left, so we see the entire execution of the plan that is formed by the move rook c8. Rook c8 sets the context, trades the right pieces, and leaves us with a winning bishop endgame. You like me to give you homework, my friends? So there we go. White to play. Please judge the strength of the move queen d5. Is queen d5 check favoring white or black? If you think white should go for it, how do you play the resulting position? How do you, for example, exchange off on d5 with this guy or with this guy? And what will be your game plan, let's say? If you go for this plan, what will be your game plan to win the resulting position? We talked about the same color bishop endgames, so it's a great consolation exercise. Please judge the strength of the move queen d5. Is it a good move for white or a chess crime? Or if it's a good move, then please tell me the plan. Write to me on YouTube and I will respond to each and every one of you. Okay? I hope you loved it. Like and subscribe if you liked the video so I can keep on producing content that actually helps you get better in this beautiful game. See you soon.